So Mark Adamoulas was recommended to me by a number of people as a top performance coach and psychologist. And they weren't wrong. What an episode this is. We go deep into what culture means. We go deep into how habits help form high performance. We try and dispel some of the myths in this particular episode around what works when you're equating sport experience to business experience. Because Mark's done it all. He's worked for the likes of Manchester United. He's worked in the rugby sector, but he's also been through a redundancy himself. And when he did, during the pandemic, he pivoted, set up his own business, and has now very, very successfully be helping organizations create high-performing cultures. So look, I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. I absolutely recommend you grab a pen and pad if you're not out walking somewhere, because there's so much golden nuggets in this particular chat, and I think you're going to like it. So without further ado, here's Mark Adamoulas, and he's on the Executive Career Jump podcast. Let's get to work.
You're listening to the Career Jump podcast. Insights, interviews, and success stories to inspire and give you the edge when you make your next career jump. Hosted by your career concierge, Andrew MacAskill.
Hello, good afternoon, and welcome back to the Executive Career Jump podcast. I'm Andrew MacAskill, your career concierge here, and I'm really delighted today to be joined by Mark Adamoulas. How are you doing?
I'm very well. How are you, Andrew?
We're really
Thanks
good.
for the invite.
No, well, thanks for agreeing to come on. Obviously, we've exchanged notes and things via LinkedIn, and I think you get involved with some very, very relevant and interesting work. So it's a real privilege to have you with us today. For those who are listening who maybe haven't come across what you do, can you tell us a little bit more about the types of things you get involved with, please?
Yeah, sure. So, my background's in psychology, so I've been involved in coaching for a number of years. What that's looked like over the last sort of 18, 20 months is probably coaching people and developing people in means that we're probably not used to. So remotely or in a hybrid sort of setting, supporting, leaders in leading teams remotely and growing company culture remotely, all the sort of water cooler conversations that we can't have in the office, all of that sort of stuff. So it's been really rewarding. And I think, I get a lot of joy out of it because it makes a fundamental difference in people's lives, especially if you think about the fact that we're kind of mostly working from home. Work life and home life is almost sort of merged to become one. So if you can certainly help people with the work side of things, you'd like to think that their overall quality of life will be good.
Absolutely. Well, how you do one thing is how you do everything, right? There's no two ways about that. And I do think we've moved from work-life balance to more of a work-life blend, haven't we? It's more integrated, do you think?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's one of my favorite expressions, really. I always give the analogy of a coffee. Like if you're a coffee fan, I don't know if you are, so if you go in and someone said, our house blend is like 70% Colombian and 30% Brazilian. It's like, well, you don't get through the first 70% of the glass and think, oh yeah, tastes pretty Colombian. Oh yeah, I can tell the Brazilian bit at the bottom. It's how that comes together. And, I don't want to say I've got a bit of beef with the term work-life balance, but every time someone says balance, I just think of these scales wobbling. And I think, surely that's not right. It's about how it all fits together. You don't go from A to B, from B to A, and so on and so forth. So it's about how it fits together for sure.
Yeah, I totally agree. So tell us a bit more about your own career journey. Obviously, you've got this psychology background. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like you're doing things now which are giving you some good fulfillment and a bit of a platform for impact. But has it always been like that, or has this evolved over time?
Yeah, it's definitely evolved. I mean, I'll always sort of say to people, sometimes I often get asked, how do I get basically your job? How do I end up doing what you do? And I thought it's definitely one of those of do what I say, not what I've done personally. So I got straight out of university, I got a job back in academia, which was for 3 years. It served its purpose, ran its course, didn't fancy myself in a tweed jacket, longer term. Ended up working in elite sports. I kind of always had sport in my blood, from, I guess, in my youth. So helping people being able to perform at the highest level was quite fundamental. I kind of knew, though, that I wanted the way to have an impact on, people's lives fundamentally would be to work in rather than work with, 25 players or even, one player, one sports person. why can't we do stuff company-wide? So that's how I find myself in the corporate space. And, I still work in sport. I still have some clients compete at the high end of sport, but fundamentally what I do now is mostly in the corporate world. And, there are a lot of parallels, and people will always make a lot of parallels between sport and corporate. I think sometimes it's, even corporate to corporate, you can't just copy and paste from one environment to another or from one person to the next. So it does need to be kind of considered. And over the last few years, I've done a lot of work on, company culture, coaching people, personal development, hybrid working environments, obviously in the last year. And it's kind of applying the principles that I've learned over time, I think from a number of different backgrounds, and kind of applying them in the modern day. So it's cool. I mean, I don't ever, weird as this might sound to some people, I genuinely love what I do. And it gets me excited. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't do it. I'm the type of person that would have kind of packed in by now.
And that is success, isn't it? From a career perspective?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, my journey over the last kind of 18 months in particular has been different because, I found myself November last year out of a role that I loved due to COVID cuts. And, me starting my own business at this point, doing things as a solo artist for the last year, it kind of wasn't by design, but it's what you have to do. There are bills to pay. And I sort of pulled together what I was doing and what I've done previously. And I mean, I'm very, very grateful that there seems to be a huge appetite out there for people and a huge need for businesses to actually go, right, fundamentally, we cannot keep on going as we were and do what we've always done under different circumstances, under different conditions. So what do the current conditions look like? How do we best adapt, and how do we, listen to the needs of people, and help them thrive so that the business can thrive? And it is success. I think it's being able to, like I said, that kind of work-life blend. The most rewarding moments I sometimes get from coachees is when we sort of talk about, for example, you might talk about presence or focus or living in the moment and stuff like that. And there's part of me sort of thinking, well, that is really, really challenging. We've all got, lives outside of work, families, and so on and so forth. But the nicest messages are at, 8 p.m. when someone says, I've just put my son to bed and we did bath time and all of that. And I left my phone downstairs. And it's blooming brilliant, this, isn't it? It's like, well, yeah, if you're not trying to read an email while you're reading a story or you're doing other stuff, if we dedicate ourselves to what's in front of us, I think there's a lot greater fulfillment. And it's the human side. It's the difference that it makes in people's day to day. If they make a bit more money at work, yeah, great, fantastic, that's success. But I think the real success is when people get that fulfillment day to day.
Yeah. And I don't think it's a huge leap to take the same approach to leadership as well, right? This whole idea of being present. How important do you see that in terms of building culture and some of the things that you're working on?
Yeah, I think it is. I think, by the way, there's the situation doesn't really help us, right? Because I've had conversations, I've been coaching people at, 1 p.m. and you can clearly see on Zoom that their eyes are still in the 9:30 meeting that morning. So, from a personal performance perspective, from a presence, from a leadership perspective, if you think of a corporate environment whereby you go from meeting room to meeting room via the water cooler, via the toilet, via this, via that, you're at least, I'm not saying that a 1.5 minute break walking between two rooms is good, but actually it's probably better than just clicking down on the next appointment on your calendar and just connecting on whatever video platform you're using. I think empathy as well as presence are fundamental now for leadership. It always has been, but now it really, really resonates, particularly given the fact that we all live different lives. We all have different needs, different family situations, and so on and so forth. In my opinion, and from what I've seen over the last sort of 18 months, it's the people that have had that empathy as well as the presence that have really excelled as leaders and got, the buy-in from their people, supported people, and so on and so forth. I think those two together are pretty fundamental.
So you've used the word presence a few times already. So it's clear that this is something that you're working a lot on. What does presence mean in a leadership context, in your view?
I think it's being in the moment is the best way I can kind of describe it. I think it's having that focus to sort of deal with, one thing at a time. be appreciative, be mindful of the situation. I say mindful is often perceived as a negative term, be mindful of this. It's almost like be careful. No, not at all. Just be aware, be immersed, be engaged, know what the situation is, and it's being able to combine the bigger picture with that sort of razor sharp focus on what's in front of you at one time. And, I'm told anyway by other people that, multitasking is a thing. I'm not particularly great at it myself, but actually I think as human beings, we're not particularly great at it at the very high level. I think if you're present and you're focused, particularly in a leadership role and a leadership capacity, if you're fully aware of what's going on, that's when you're able to excel. And it takes sometimes a moment. It almost takes a bit of an epiphany to go, wow, I was totally immersed. And look what happened as a result. You almost realize there is almost like a glass ceiling that needs to be shattered regards one's own perception of what good leadership is when you get it right.
Yeah. And it's the listening as much as anything, rather than waiting for your time to speak, or just roughly or I guess, I don't know, is it hearing? It's like that extra level of active listening where you're spotting what's behind the message, you're picking up non-verbal cues, all of that stuff starts to come out. And that's all very trust building and allows you to do your job better, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, there is a difference between listening and hearing as much as there is between seeing and watching. I think there's an active component in there. There's a purposeful component in there where that is what you're doing at that particular time. And so many times, this is where I sort of feel, in-person meetings are so much better, because you can tell more of the non-verbal cues about body language and stuff like that. I had a meeting the other week with someone, and we'd never met. We'd only met virtually. And yes, I recognized some of their mannerisms. I hadn't seen any other, mannerisms that they do. I saw some new mannerisms on the day. But we also recognized that we had no idea before meeting how tall we both were. We're both 6'5". And it was like, oh, you're actually quite tall. And it's just some of the details that have probably been lost in the last 18 months, where you just don't quite have as full a picture of the people opposite you.
No, you definitely don't. And you always have this kind of awkward first 90 seconds because you know each other, but you don't. And it's I've had this with coaching clients and colleagues and everything, that that first in-person meeting after the last couple of years, when you've been dealing with someone for a while, it's really strange, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And I think it's one of those things that, I think, the next few years, I personally can't see 9 to 5, Monday to Friday ever returning, because I think businesses will recognize, the ones that haven't, and clearly some of them have, it's just not efficient. So it will become the norm. It will become habitual that, well, actually, I speak to my colleagues virtually from time to time, but, I also see them in the office, and we also go to the pub after work and all of that. That will become the norm, but it's not the norm right now. And again, like every habit in life, you become accustomed to it and it becomes less of a thing. It's just what you do.
Yeah, I think the market will dictate it anyway, because I think talent, and that's an overused word, right? But let's call it talent, as in the people that work for other people. I think they're in a mindset where there's been this circuit breaker during the pandemic, and they're now viewing work in a different way, and they're demanding to be engaged with in a more flexible, more tailored, more personalized productivity pattern. So even for those who are holding on to dear life to the old models, I just think that there's been such a shift that talent is almost acting as a customer or a consumer and will define what needs to happen anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the analogy I often use sometimes is, the ice age is coming, don't worry. It will clear the dinosaurs out, and being able to, when you think about, businesses use the term employee value proposition, it's gone from job title, salary, bonus, car allowance to flexible working, X, Y, Z, the other, that's not actually down to what you get on your payslip. It's about all the other stuff. Because again, going back to work-life blend, people are looking at the situation thinking, well, I'll take a 10 grand pay cut. I'm not spending that extra 10 grand. It's sat in the bank. I'd rather work somewhere where I can spend a bit more money and I'm not, doing emails at 10 o'clock at night or doing X, Y, Z, or where, the narrative around work as soon as restrictions are lifted is, right, break time's over, everyone back into work. It's like, well, I think we've excelled over the last 18 months, don't you? That kind of mentality. So people are looking at the fuller picture now, for sure.
Yeah. So the ice age is coming. There's a bit of corporate paleontology going on in terms of digging up some of the dinosaurs and working out what comes next. What else do you think you're seeing in terms of what the next chapter looks like in the new world of work, as they're calling it?
I think the hybrid environment is really important. I say that I am biased. I have helped some businesses set their own hybrid environment up from a kind of culture and behaviors and, psychological safety point of view. There is a little bit of I think we're kind of growing out of the, out of sight, out of mind narrative of someone who works remotely more than not, or in the previous life worked remotely more than not. Are they being passed over for promotion opportunities? Are they getting the same amount of recognition purely because it isn't bums on seats in the office, that situation? I don't think the let's see how we go mentality quite cuts it, to be totally honest. Oh yeah, we'll see how we go. Oh, well, you can just work from home 3 days a week. Okay, what does that look like from a strategy perspective? Oh, well, we'll figure it out. No, sorry, that's not good enough. You need a plan, you need a strategy to be able to do that. People need to know what it means. If you go down to kind of basic psychology, the more uncertainty there is in people's lives, the more on edge they are. Let's, as employers, as large organizations that definitely have the budgets and the time and the capacity to roll something substantial out, let's not be lazy here. Let's be proactive. Let's be purposeful and give something to employees so that they know this is what it looks like. And there's a bit of a reassurance there, even if, you're never going to make everyone happy. But as an employee, if I worked for a business that was really proactive and they'd clearly pulled their finger out and done a lot of work in that space, I'd feel a bit more secure. I'd think, okay, well, they're not going to make everyone happy, but they've had a crack at it. They've put something together. They've tried, they've put time and money and effort into it. Whereas I still see a little bit of oh yeah, well, we'll figure it out. And yeah, you can be at home 2 days a week. And no, sorry.
Yeah. Hooked on hopium is how I would describe that.
Yes.
Absolutely hooked on hopium. And it's a very addictive substance, and it's very dangerous, because what we definitely don't want to be doing, surely, is adding more uncertainty to the mix. We've already got massive changes in our lives, right? And this pandemic in general has been you talk about psychological safety. I mean, I don't think anybody's felt fully psychologically safe when you've got something that attacks potentially your financial security, your health, your loved ones, your family, your kids' education, your place of, everything has all been up in the air, hasn't it? So I think there's a real social responsibility, and it's good for business to say, well, do you know what? We're going to make sure we're not adding to that mix for the people that work for us, and we're bringing some clarity and transparency to what we're doing. Hey, everybody. Sorry to interrupt the podcast, but I wanted to tell you very quickly about how Executive Career Jump can help end your career misery. So when you hit our website, there's 3 different ways that our digital resources can help you. For a start, if you're looking to jump in to a new role, we've got the premier online job search course that you're going to find anywhere. There's a number of different memberships to help you understand what you want and how to go and get it in this current environment. So we're here to help you if you want a new career. We've also got a section if you want to jump up in your career. And so this is all about our online leadership hub, which is a platform full of content, includes 2 meetups per quarter and a whole thriving community of leaders trying to become the best leaders they can be. Go and check that out too. And the third area in our website and the other digital course that might help you is our business launcher course. So we've created the business launcher program that we wish we had when we were setting up on their own. So if you've decided to jump off of the employment stream and start up on your own, make sure you head over and check that out too. You can find all of these resources, a bunch of free content, links to previous podcasts and more at execcareerjump.com. That's execcareerjump.com. Now, back to the pod. Switching lanes a little bit then. I want to talk sport, which won't surprise you. I love sport as well. Massive sport fan and big part of my upbringing as well. There's often parallels made between the sporting world and the business world. And some of them I think are laughable and some of them I think are really useful, if I'm honest. Wondered what your thoughts were on that. What do you think are useful parallels? And equally, what do you think are some things that are used by leadership teams in corporates that maybe aren't so helpful when it comes to sport parallels?
Yeah, I think, it really is quite telling that, there are so many to make. And there are so many which are valuable and some equally which are kind of laughable. I'll go back to the comment I made earlier about the sort of copy-paste mentality. I mean, I'm all for vicarious learning, whether that's from someone in the sports world, business world, spiritual world, your next door neighbor, whatever it is, someone on YouTube. But actually it has to apply to you. I think some of the biggest pitfalls that people make, the biggest pitfall I think that teams make and people make is they'll take an analogy. Context is key, right? They'll take an analogy or they'll take a quote from an elite sport and they will go with it, run with it. And you almost have to have a bit of a sort of reality check sometime. I think the one that is probably quite transferable, previously British cycling team, this guy, Sir Dave Brailsford, he'd speak about 1%ers. And, I've had conversations with coachees that say, I think there's a 1%er for me here and there's a 1% for me there. And, without bringing them back down to earth too abruptly, you kind of need to say, well, I think it's more of a 41% than a 1%er. You are significantly behind what an Olympic athlete is or what an elite athlete is, the room for growth. So actually what I think, as a result, businesses put the bar too low. Organizations put the bar too low, think, I've got 1% to grow. No, actually, you've got 1% and another 40, to go, because that is the standard. The ones where I think that there are a lot of lessons, and I mean, there are a lot of books being written about this sort of stuff. I think routines and habits, quite key in day-to-day life, not just sport, everyone's life. And, having a bit of a sort of, appreciation of what athletes have to go through is fundamental. I often get asked, I'll never forget this, having worked at Manchester United, having worked with some fairly prominent footballers, I'll never forget that someone said, what does so-and-so have for breakfast? I told him, honestly, I said, well, Weetabix and a banana, why? And they were like, we were kind of expecting like a goji berry smoothie or something like that. It's like, well, no, he's just a normal bloke that has normal breakfast, just works really damn hard, is very self-aware and all of those things. So again, these people aren't, people sprinkled with fairy dust or anything like that. They're just normal people that have applied themselves tremendously well. Just on a final note on that, I think there are three things fundamentally we all as humankind think we know a lot about, but actually the application and execution is quite poor. And I think it's how we motivate ourselves. Fundamentally, we get it wrong a lot on an individual level. I think the way we set goals personally and, as teams, as leaders and so on and so forth, again, very, very popular, theme, poorly executed largely. And I think the other one is reflection. And I often challenge people and sort of say, well, if we sort of call it goal reviewing rather than goal setting, it kind of puts more emphasis on the review part, on the recalibration part, on the, okay, let's correct course and go again, rather than, we've done our goals for the year. We want to be X amount of growth, X amount of this, X amount of that. Surely we're not going to sit down in a year's time and have the conversation when we've done nothing, to kind of course correct or recalibrate in the meantime. So those are three things that are very, very prominent in sport and equally poorly applied, I think, in pockets.
Yeah, well, we write it off as talent, don't we?
Yeah.
It's the classic, we write it off as talent. I love your point about marginal gains as well. I'd never thought about it in that context, that actually that could be a constraining concept for organizations. It really can, because you're right. We're not fine tuning in most organizations or indeed in terms of ourselves, are we? There's bigger leaps to be made, which I think is brilliant. And also, I love this piece that you've just said there, because what that brings for me that I wanted to talk to you about as well is about ownership. Like, I'm sure you've had that kind of ache of imposter syndrome sometimes with the people that you've dealt with. And I do as well. Like when I'm dealing with successful business people that have certainly are further ahead in the journey, let's say, than I am. And yet kind of they're coming to us for help. But the one common denominator in all of them, there's no one personality type. There's no one background. There's no one skill set. There's not even one particular set of upbringing or anything like that. Like, it's very hard to get all the most successful people that we've had come through Executive Career Jump and kind of categorize them. But the one thing I always say when people say to me, like, what are you seeing? What do you think is making people successful in their career, whatever success means to them, is ownership. They all have an internal locus of control that is quite extreme compared to the general population. And I wonder, do you think that, that idea of taking ownership, one, is important for success, and two, is it something we can work on? Because it's also tempting to blame and externalize what's going on around us, isn't it?
100%. And I think, for me, Andrew, I think it is ownership, but it's also energy and focus. And if you look at the things that cause people stress, it's uncertainty, and largely it's stuff outside of their control. If you break down what you've genuinely got a credible say over and where you're going to get a return on your money if you put your energy into, that it's a relatively limited space. But we look at all of these things afar and we kind of go, oh, but I can't do this and I can't do it. Well, actually just do what's in front of you. And there's a thing in there about, ownership, self-awareness, presence, all of those kind of things are fundamental, right? It doesn't surprise me that is the common denominator. Effectively, I see that as, efficiency in a really crude way. I see that as being efficient, as in, I know what I can do. I know what I can influence. I know what is mine. I'm going to spend a lot more time on that than on the other stuff. I see that as a part of efficiency. And I also think on the self-awareness and ownership, a lot of the time we talk about self-awareness and self-development, but actually I think a fundamental step in the middle is self-acceptance, as in knowing what your strengths are and areas you need to work on. Actually being cool with that. Do you know what? I realize I'm not particularly great at that. That is why I'm putting time into it. Rather than, oh, I know, I've been told I need to work on that. Well, I'll just kind of, blind denial, let me just carry on with everything else. Actually, it's through ownership, you kind of get that. It's almost a humility to kind of know, right, I recognize that this isn't my strongest point, but I am taking ownership of it and I am investing time, energy, and all the rest into it to grow it.
Absolute sage advice. Love that. There's bias to action. Absolutely love it. Final thing before we get on to some more quickfire stuff. Mm-hmm. What's culture?
Oh, you'll see thousands of different definitions, right? Everyone's got their own view on it. I think it's the combination of the behaviors, the mindset, the context, the unwritten stuff, the small gestures, all of that within, an ecosystem. And I'm saying ecosystem because families have a particular culture. Workspaces have a particular culture. Pubs have a particular culture. It's not, culture's obviously largely been associated with a place of work, but, culture is still a thing. You talk about popular culture or whatever. So I think it's a series of, behaviors, people sharing the same ideas, having a similar view of the world or what, things, how they'd like to kind of excel and stuff. But I also think it's quite easy to tell a good one from a bad one, and it's almost, people have a particular way of behaving when they're within a culture. Sometimes you sort of see people in and outside of work and they're totally different, or you see their standards drop. Oh, it's just what we do. Well, you've become that right now. It's just what you do within work. Is the person in work and outside of work different? I don't think so. Last time I checked, they weren't. But again, fundamentally, we can grow or we can be diminished by being part of a particular culture.
Brilliant. Really, really interesting. Good. Thank you, Mark. On to some quickfire stuff then, if that's all right with you. So we love quotes, right? So is there a particular quote that you like or that resonates?
So I'm not going to pull one out from someone famous. I actually had written down talking about work-life blend.
Oh.
And underlining the blend component of it, because I think it's absolutely fundamental. The other one that I was said to me by someone, I'll give you a little bit of context. When in my third year at university, I landed an internship that was, I still sort of think, how did you get that? It was remarkably cool. I ended up working with someone who, it's in a football context. So ended up doing an internship somewhere, working with people that I'd sort of seen on telly and, a bit wet behind the ears, 21, 22, and you're getting all giddy. And I remember saying at the end of the internship to this person who was, quite famous and successful in that field. I said, look, I can never repay you. Like, you've just given me your time, afforded me the opportunity to work in the organization. I don't know what to say. I'm stuck for words. I can never thank you enough for this. And he said, all I've done is left you a ladder. You've climbed up it yourself, but just make sure you leave it there for the next person. That's what you can do for me. And I thought, wow, you are at the very, very top of your field. Fundamentally, you're a good person. Fundamentally, you want to develop other people as well. You're not, self-centered or anything like that. So leaving the ladder there for people is something I always do. There's no point just absorbing, again, you could have a debate about what is success, but if you can't help other people and you can't be a force for good, you can't support others along your way, what's the point? I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do what I do if I didn't want to do that as well.
Absolutely. Drop the ladder back down. We love that. Books that you rate?
I'll give you 2. I'll give you 3. Why not?
So
one I actually just discovered in lockdown by a lady called Erin Mayer. It's called The Culture Map. You'll know by now that I'm half Greek and I love traveling, love culture in terms of national culture, how people behave in different countries. Culture Map's absolutely wicked because it basically is almost like a map of the world of traits, behavior, customs, what to expect in terms of people's behavior, what to expect, if you're going to collaborate with people from a particular country. I mean, it's not pigeonholing people, but it's just, again, if you're going to collaborate with people from another country to have different customs, different behaviors, it's being able to kind of communicate on their wavelength. So I love Culture Map by Erin Mayer. Personal favorite, Dan Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow. It changed my life, changed the way I look about life. That's probably number 1, actually, Dan Kahneman. And it's just how we operate, how our brain works. And it's not in, Harvard terms. It's very much in layman's terms, very easily absorbable, very, call to action sort of based. You will get a lot and you will think, I can try this, I can try that, I can experiment with this and all of that. And it's kind of led me to, every time I'm stuck with work, and this is the liberty of being able to work for yourself, right? Or work with people who get you and just play to your strengths. I just go for a walk and it helps me get unstuck. I don't take my phone or anything like that. I just go, I clear my head and I come back. And the kind of self-development, philosophical romantic in me absolutely loved Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey. I think it is an absolute gem of a book. It is, if you're going to be reflective, if you're going to be philosophical, if you want to take stock, if you want food for thought, absolutely go for Matthew McConaughey, Green Lights. Loved it. I didn't think I was going to love it that much. Absolutely loved it.
Yeah, I think he's been quite a big surprise for a lot of people this year. I heard him on the High Performance podcast with Jake Humphrey and Damien Hughes. And I was flabbergasted at how he came across on that. There's so many more layers than I would have ever have realized. Yeah,
I mean, I think, at the end of the day, a lot of the people at the top of their field are very bright, articulate people. And I guess, if he's probably better known for rom-coms, maybe it's rom-coms you wouldn't associate with bright, articulate. But yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, very good. You mentioned earlier about self-awareness and working on yourself. What's the next skill that you want to develop?
So there are 2. And you can give me feedback on this at the end. On Zoom calls, a lot of the time, when I take a moment to think, I look away from the camera. So it's being able to kind of be present and maintain eye contact, which I have been working on for a while. I still need to take a break. And actually, it's exploring Dan Kahneman's book of why people look away to regain focus and all of that. That is one of the things that I've been trying to do, especially, and actually, the last 20 months have been fantastic. So that's an ongoing thing because my instinct initially is to look away. The other thing is I've done bits of content. I love writing. I've done things. I've never done things in a purposeful, concerted way. And to be honest, because I haven't got the time, because I don't want to say too busy delivering, but actually, that's what short term as, and especially in the last year, I've needed short term with a view to long term, but short term's been a priority. it's being able to kind of create content in a purposeful, planned way. As a solo artist, if you end up doing content, it means that you're not doing something else. But that's the thing that has always been on the back burner. And I've always dipped in and out of it when people have said, like yourself, or like someone saying, could you write a blog? Could you do a video? Could you do an interview? Do a podcast? I love it. I love doing these things, but I've probably need to get better at doing things in a purposeful way off my own back.
That's a really good one. I think a lot of people are grappling with that challenge at the moment, because there is a compound interest effect to personal branding. There's no doubt about that. And I think it's all about repurposing, right? So we could send you the video file from this, and you could get someone to take 60-second clips from you throughout this and give you the next 10 updates. And that would cost you about 50 quid on Fiverr or something for someone to chop this up and edit it for you. And then you'd have your next 10 posts before you even started without any additional time. So I think it's about making things work for you and atomizing them and then redistribute them. It can be done efficiently. We don't have to create from scratch every day. It's my core thought on that. But no, that's a good one. A couple more things then. You were made redundant, correct? Yeah. What advice would you have for people? We get a lot of listeners who are going through some kind of transition. Some of them have been, blindsided, didn't see it coming. It's a tough thing, right? Redundancy. Like, what advice would you give to any of the listeners going through redundancy?
But it's not personal. It's not a reflection on them. I think the first thing, I think one of the things that I wrestled with, given everything I know and everything I'd coach everyone else on, it does feel sometimes personal. And you do sort of feel, you need to provide. You had a job and now you've lost it. How are you not responsible in some way, shape, or form? But the reality is that, you're not. It's a rubbish situation, but ultimately, things will kind of get better. The second thing is that I'd say is take your time. I lost my role beginning of November, and people always laugh when I say this, but it is the honest truth. I probably watched Sky Sports for 6 hours of the day through till about mid-December. I had 20 odd days annual leave that I hadn't taken because the nature of the project I was doing, I was up coaching people in Australia at 6 a.m. I was on evening calls with the States and taking breaks in between, but it had been pretty full on to deliver a project for the last 6 months. So I'm sure there are better ways to recover than watching Sky Sports, but take time and, reset physically, mentally. And at the end of the day, if you just, there's always the temptation to just go, right, I need a job, I need it now, go. You're probably going to turn up better to interviews, come across better if you've actually looked after yourself and taken care and recovered, and you're at peace with what's happened, because sometimes it takes a long time.
It's a grieving process is how we describe it.
Of course. Those are the things. And I think it's an opportunity, I would not be doing the stuff that I'm doing now if I was still in my role. I love my old role. I had a lot of fun in my old role. I think I was very good at my old role, but it was doing different stuff. And I look at everything that I'm doing. I think I'm a pretty grateful, self-aware person. Things have gone, I think the beginning of the year, February time, if you'd have offered me December looking like this last February, I'd have snapped your hand off. So very grateful, very privileged, very lucky, but also it's allowed me to concentrate and focus. I will take a little bit of the credit for it, because I thought, right, where can you have an impact? What do you want to do? You've got a blank canvas. What's going to happen? Here's a pen, draw it, chase it. And I think being empowered enough to be able to take that risk, take that leap, it's quite important. I recognize, by the way, that, again, like I said, I'm privileged, I'm lucky that I have been able to do that, and that other people might not have quite the same circumstances and opportunity. But as much as you can, please do what you want to do after you've been made redundant, and it will soften the pain a little bit.
What a message to finish the episode on. Absolutely love that. Thanks so much, Mark. For anyone who's listening that wants to connect with you, follow you, engage with you in some sort of way, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, just on LinkedIn or on email. The site is currently being built. It's one of those things, as a solo artist, you end up chasing a lot of different things. So the site is currently being built, but the best way to connect is reach out on LinkedIn or drop me an email or go from there, follow the page, whatever.
Brilliant stuff. Well, thanks again for freeing up your time. Make sure you are following Mark if you're not already. And we'll catch up very soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.
You've been listening to the Career Jump podcast with Andrew MacAskill. For more resources and information, just head over to the Career Jump website at www.execcareerjump.com to supercharge your job search and start making moves. Let's get to work.